Chuck said, "It started with turbulence, but not the kind you feel in the sky." The morning sun poured over the private terminal like golden silk, warm and calm, giving no hint of what was about to unfold thousands of feet in the air. The flight was supposed to be routine, maybe even luxurious. A sleek white private jet, engine humming like a soft lullaby, waited patiently on the tarmac. Passengers strolled toward the steps, some wide-eyed with privilege, others silent with thoughts, each unaware of the storm that would soon rattle every assumption on board. She wore a grey hoodie and simple black leggings, no jewelry, no makeup, no entourage. Her afro was tied back in a loose bun, and a pair of wireless earbuds peeked out from beneath her curls. To most people around her, she looked like any other, traveler quiet, reserved, alone. But she wasn't just another passenger. A few feet ahead of her, a woman dressed sharply in a navy blue flight attendant uniform stood stiffly near the plane's door. Her arms crossed, face already twisted. With impatience, her name tag read Chelsea. With her slick bun and piercing glare, Chelsea seemed to believe her uniform gave her the right to judge anyone who didn't fit her standard. And today, her eyes landed on the black woman in the hoodie. Behind them in the lounge, a teenage boy named Malik sat nervously at the edge of his seat. 17 years old, lean build, polite to a fault. He clutched his boarding pass with sweaty fingers. He wasn't used to this kind of setting: private jets, men in suits, women in pearls. He was here by chance, not status. A scholarship award had granted him access to a once-in-a-lifetime mentorship program, and the organizers had flown him first class on a private charter to New York. Just then, a heavily pregnant white woman entered the lounge, her hands pressed to her lower back. She looked uncomfortable, her swollen belly pulling her frame forward. Malik glanced at her, then at the vacant seat beside him. Without a word, he stood and offered her his seat. She paused, surprised. Most people wouldn't even notice her, let alone stand up, but Malik did without hesitation. She gave him a grateful smile and took the seat. Neither of them knew this small act would echo far beyond this airport, far beyond this day. Back at the jet's entrance, Chelsea narrowed her eyes at the woman in the hoodie. Her voice was sharp, condescending. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said. "Are you sure you're supposed to be on this flight?" The woman didn't flinch. She simply showed her boarding pass with a calmness that almost irritated Chelsea more. "I have a seat," she replied softly. Chelsea barely looked at the pass before shaking her head. "We have a very strict dress code. You'll need to step aside and wait until I check with the captain." The woman blinked slowly. "It's a private flight." "Exactly," Chelsea said smugly. "Which means standards are even higher." The few passengers behind her started whispering, watching the scene unfold like it was some kind of airport drama. A man in a suit looked away uncomfortably. Another woman pulled her sunglasses down, intrigued. The black woman stepped aside, saying nothing. A minute passed, then two. Finally, the same pregnant woman Malik had helped boarded the flight, escorted by a junior flight attendant. She nodded politely to everyone, then paused when she saw the black woman standing outside, arms folded across her chest. Inside, Chelsea muttered something to the captain on the intercom, rolling her eyes as she described the woman as a last-minute standby who's clearly not a VIP. Then, without warning, Chelsea returned to the doorway and barked, "You need to exit the boarding area immediately. This flight is not open for public boarding." The black woman raised an eyebrow. "I own the plane," she said calmly. The silence that followed hit harder than any turbulence ever could. Chelsea's lips parted, but no words came out. Inside the cabin, heads began to turn. The captain slowly rose from his seat. Even Malik, who had just boarded and was settling into his seat at the back, noticed something shift in the air. The tension was thick. A few gasps rippled through the crowd as the realization sank in. But Chelsea didn't back down. She laughed nervously at first, then with mockery. "Oh, please," she said, waving her hand. "That's a new one. Ma'am, don't make a scene. If you don't leave right now." And then it happened. With a loud crack, The sound echoed through the lounge like a whip slicing through paper. Chelsea had slapped her. Just like that. Right across the face. The passengers froze. The woman's head jerked slightly from the impact, but her eyes didn't blink. No one spoke. Even the engines outside seemed to fall silent for a moment. Malik stood up slowly from his seat at the back, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. The pregnant woman gasped and covered her mouth. Did she just? Before anyone could react, a security guard began walking over from the far end of the terminal. But it wasn't just him. Behind him, a tall man in a dark suit with an earpiece Secret Service or something close entered the scene with urgency. He stopped next to the black woman and said quietly, "Ma'am, we've been alerted. Your pilot is waiting and the board has been informed." Chelsea's face turned pale. She looked at the man, then back at the woman she had just slapped, her voice cracking. Wait, you're—" The woman turned slightly, brushing a finger across her cheek where the slap had landed. Then she finally looked Chelsea in the eye. "I'm the owner of the aircraft, the CEO of this airline's parent company, and your superior's boss's boss," she said, her voice steady. "But more importantly, I'm a human being, and you just assaulted me." Chelsea stumbled back, lips trembling. Inside the cabin, Malik's heart beat like a drum. He wasn't sure what would happen next. The flight that had started with politeness and quiet whispers had turned into a live wire of power, pride, and deep consequences. And somewhere in the quiet chaos, the pregnant woman reached into her purse and handed Malik a small folded note. He didn't open it. Right away. He just stared at it, confused. Because right then, no one could have predicted what that note would say or how it would change Malik's life forever. ChatGPT said. Malik sat frozen in his seat, the note still resting gently in his palm. The cabin buzzed with quiet murmurs, a mix of confusion and disbelief. No one dared speak loudly. No one wanted to be the first to break the heavy silence. After what they had just witnessed, he looked toward the front of the plane. The black woman, still composed, now stood inside, her eyes calmly scanning the stunned passengers. Her voice had been steady, her movements calm, but there was a fire beneath her stillness, something unshakable. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to prove who she was with noise. Her presence said it all. Power didn't always come in loud footsteps. Sometimes it walked in wearing a hoodie, quiet but unstoppable. Chelsea had disappeared. Some said she was escorted off the plane. Others said she simply ran. Either way, her absence only deepened the mystery swirling around. The billionaire woman now seated in first class. Malik's fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded the note the pregnant woman had handed him. The handwriting was soft, graceful. Just a single line. "Call this number after you land. Tell them you gave up your seat today." No name, no explanation. Just a number written in blue ink. Malik stared at it for a moment. Who was this woman? Why had she handed this to him? And what did giving up his seat have to do with anything? He tucked the note into his pocket and leaned back, trying to breathe. This was supposed to be the best day of his life. A private flight, a scholarship, a chance to meet mentors who could open doors he'd never even dreamed of. And now he was sitting just a few feet behind a woman whose net worth could probably buy the plane 10 times over. But why had no one recognized her? Why had she chosen to dress so simply, and most importantly, why had she let Chelsea treat her like that without saying anything? Until the last possible moment? It didn't make sense. None of it did. Across the aisle, another passenger whispered, "She's Maya Laurent, right? That's her. The tech mogul who vanished from public view after her last company went public." Malik leaned slightly forward. That name, it sounded familiar. Another voice joined in, quieter. "I heard she turned down an interview with Forbes. Said she doesn't do press anymore." Someone else added, "She funds schools, STEM programs, especially for underrepresented kids. Like big money." Malik sat up straighter. STEM programs. Scholarships. Could she be connected to the mentorship he was flying out for? His eyes shifted toward her again. Maya Laurent. He'd heard the name before, briefly, in an article about under 30 billionaires making a difference. But the photo had been outdated, blurry. He had no idea she looked like this so young, so ordinary, so powerful. The plane hummed steadily. As it reached cruising altitude, a new flight attendant, clearly shaken, moved down the aisle offering water. No one said much. The tension hadn't gone away, it had just settled beneath the surface. Maya sat with her head resting against the window, her eyes half closed. But she wasn't sleeping. Her mind was awake, sharp. She was remembering. It had taken her years to build what she now owned, and longer still to survive what she'd come from. Born in Baton Rouge, raised by her grandmother, first computer at 11, coding by 12. By 15, she built a simple app that got picked up by a local startup. At 18, she was recruited to a top-tier tech company in Silicon Valley, and by 24, she had started her own. The world clapped when she succeeded, but they whispered when she didn't show up to red carpets or interviews. They didn't understand why she avoided attention. They didn't know the weight she carried. Every room she entered, she had to prove she belonged twice as hard, twice as fast. Being black, being a woman, being young. And every time someone mistook her for just another assistant or someone's guest, she swallowed the sting, stayed quiet, and let her work do the speaking. But today had tested her patience in a different way. The slap still rang faintly in her ears, not from pain, but from insult. Not to her status, but to her humanity. That's why she didn't say anything at first. Not because she couldn't, but because she wanted to see who would notice, who would step in, who would speak up. No one had, except for one person, the boy in the back, the one who had given up his seat without being asked, the one who didn't know her, didn't know anyone, but still chose kindness without an audience, without reward. Maya opened her eyes and glanced back briefly. She had noticed him the moment he stood up in the lounge. She'd watched how gently he'd spoken to the pregnant woman, how he smiled. Even though he looked nervous, he reminded her of herself at that age, too aware of how out of place he seemed. Too polite to say so. That's why she asked her assistant to find his name. That's why she wrote the note. Some people in this world deserved more than closed doors and silent thanks. Some people needed a hand reaching back for them. Maya believed in that. She had lived by that. Malik was still staring out the window, the clouds sliding past like soft cotton. He didn't know it yet, but his life had just shifted. One quiet decision, giving up a seat, had opened a door he couldn't see yet, but it was there. At the front of the plane, Maya's phone buzzed silently in her hand. A message lit up. The screen. Board alert received. Flight staff under review. Do you wish to proceed with termination? She stared at the words for a long second. No response yet. She wasn't angry anymore. She was disappointed. But she wasn't going to act out of revenge. That wasn't who she was. What mattered to her now was what happened next. Because the world had watched too many people in power stay silent, and too many good people like Malik get overlooked. This wasn't just about a slap or a mistaken identity. It was about something bigger. The story wasn't finished. Not yet. And for Malik, Maya, and everyone else on that plane, the next chapter was already on its way. Chuck said the plane sailed quietly through the clouds, but inside, unease still gripped the cabin like a silent storm. Every small movement felt loud. The clink of a water bottle cap, the shuffle of feet, everything stood out more than usual. People avoided eye contact, especially with Maya, unsure whether to acknowledge her presence or pretend they hadn't witnessed what had happened. Some looked guilty, others curious, but no one said a word. Malik kept replaying the moment in his mind. The slap, the pause, the reveal. It was all too much to process, and now that small note in his pocket carried a strange weight. He looked around, wondering if anyone else had seen it happen. The pregnant woman sat calmly, sipping water, her hand resting gently on her stomach. She looked relaxed, almost as if she'd known exactly what she was doing when she handed Malik that paper. Meanwhile, up front, Maya remained still. Her mind wandered not to the confrontation, but to the years that had led to it. She remembered boardrooms where her voice had been ignored until a man repeated her idea and was praised. She remembered being followed through stores, questioned at hotel check-ins, and mistaken for catering at her own events, and still, she rose through it all. But days like today reminded her that even with power, respect isn't always automatic, especially when you look like her. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling of the plane. Her company owned 6 jets. This was one of the smaller ones used for internal travel and special programs. The crew wasn't supposed to know who would be flying unless security required it. She'd chosen to fly quietly, dressed casually on purpose, not to test anyone, but to feel what it was like to move freely. She wanted to see how people treated her when they didn't know her title or net worth. And now she had her answer. Chelsea's voice still rang in her memory. That tone, that dismissiveness, the kind that strips a person of dignity in seconds. It had taken everything in Maya to stay calm, to not let anger speak before her character did. But now, beneath the calm, something deeper brewed, something unresolved. Back in the rear seats, Malik pulled out his phone and stared at the note again. He wanted to call the number. Every part of him was curious, but something held him back. What if it was a prank? What if it wasn't meant for him? Or worse, what if it changed everything? The woman next to him, a middle-aged traveler in a beige suit, leaned over slightly. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Malik nodded quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine. You were very kind earlier," she added, smiling gently. "Offering your seat like that. Not everyone would have done that." He gave a small shrug. Felt like the right thing to do. She looked at him for a second as if trying to figure him out, then turned back to her book. Malik sat in silence, unsure what to do next. A part of him felt like this was more than just a strange flight. Something bigger was happening, and he was somehow in the middle of it. The co-pilot stepped into the cabin briefly, his voice low but clear. "We're expecting a smooth descent. Estimated landing in just over an hour." But smooth was the last word anyone on board would have used to describe this journey. Back in the lounge, long after the flight had taken off, Chelsea sat in a small airport security room, her hands shaking slightly as she filled out a report. She had been removed from duty suspended pending investigation, and she still didn't fully understand what had happened. She thought the woman was just another passenger. Her outfit, her silence, it didn't scream wealth or authority. But then again, maybe that was the point. Chelsea rubbed her temples. She didn't consider herself racist. At least, she never thought of herself that way. But in hindsight, she realized how quickly she had made assumptions about the hoodie, about the attitude, about the lack of makeup or jewelry. She had judged Maya before even asking her name. And now it might cost her more than her job. As the plane began its descent, the cabin lights dimmed slightly. Malik still hadn't made the call, but his fingers hovered over the screen, the number already punched in. Just one tap, and he'd be connected to something or someone on the other. End of this mystery. But something stopped him. He glanced back at Maya. She hadn't looked at him once since boarding. It was as if she was waiting, testing. Not in a cruel way, but in a careful one. Like she wanted to know if he would act out of curiosity or purpose. The truth was, Malik had grown up with people like her in his family, quiet fighters. His mother had worked 2 jobs. His older sister had raised him while studying at night. His uncle had once told him real power doesn't need to shout. It just keeps moving. He was starting to understand what that meant. The plane touched down with a gentle bounce. Passengers straightened in their seats, stretching arms and necks, but the silence remained, as if no one wanted to be the first to break it. Malik finally pressed the call button. 1 ring, 2. Then a calm voice answered. "Lauren Foundation. How may I direct your call?" He hesitated, then cleared his throat. I was told to call this number. I gave up my seat today to a pregnant woman. She handed me a note. There was a pause. Then the voice responded, a bit warmer. Yes, we were expecting your call. Please hold. Malik blinked, expecting. A few seconds later, a new voice came. On. A man this time, soft-spoken, professional. Malik Johnson. Why, yes, that's me. Miss Laurent would like to meet with you. Today, if possible. He froze. Wait. Me. Why? She believes in recognizing quiet leadership, the man replied. Your decision today, though small to you, was significant. She noticed. She wants to talk about your future. Malik sat speechless, the phone pressed tightly to his ear. In front of him, Maya stood, waiting near the exit of the plane. Their eyes finally met, and in that moment, Malik understood something he never had before. Sometimes, you don't choose when your life changes. It chooses you. But the question was, would he be ready for what came next? ChatGPT said. Malik stepped off the plane with a strange heaviness in his chest. The sky was cloudy now, grey with the threat of rain. The tarmac smelled of jet fuel and damp concrete. He followed the others through the private terminal, but his feet moved slower, like he was walking into something he couldn't fully see yet. Just a few steps ahead, Maya walked silently, flanked now by two assistants in black suits. Her face gave away nothing. She didn't glance back, didn't signal to him, didn't speak. But Malik could feel it. This wasn't over. Something was still coming, he just didn't know what. Inside the terminal, a black luxury SUV waited near the entrance, the kind of vehicle you see in movies, with tinted windows and doors that open before you reach them. One of the assistants turned slightly and gestured for Malik to approach. Miss Laurent would like a word with you. Malik hesitated. His palms were sweaty, and his stomach twisted with nerves. Was this real? Had all this really started just because he gave up a seat? He glanced at the others still gathering luggage and murmuring among themselves. Most of them still had no idea what really happened. He climbed into the car. The doors shut behind him with a soft thump. Inside, the silence was almost louder than outside. Maya sat across from him, legs crossed, hands resting on her lap. She didn't speak for a few seconds. Her eyes were tired but sharp, studying him, not in a threatening way, but like she was measuring something deeper than words. You didn't have to call, she said finally. Most people wouldn't have. Malik swallowed hard. I didn't know what else to do. That's what made the difference. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. I grew up like you, she added. Different place, same feeling. Outnumbered, underestimated. Her voice was steady, but there was a slight tension in it now, like she was holding something back. They don't expect people like us to make decisions that ripple, she said. But you did. You acted without being seen. That's rare. The car moved quietly through the city, raindrops beginning to tap gently against the windows. Malik wanted to ask her about the flight, about Chelsea, about what would happen now, but he didn't dare interrupt. Then she looked straight at him. Do you know why I really fly without revealing who I am? She asked. He shook his head. Because I'm tired of curated respect. I want to see who people really are when they think no one's watching. She paused, then leaned forward slightly. And every time someone like Chelsea shows up, every time someone gets bold the moment they think you're powerless. Malik felt his chest tighten. Her words were landing hard now, not just in his ears but deep inside. Power, she said, doesn't protect you from bias. It just gives you more chances to confront it. She pulled out her phone and turned it toward him. On the screen was a paused video. It was grainy, shot from an overhead camera inside the jet. Malik stared. It was the moment Chelsea slapped Maya. The sound wasn't on, but the image was enough. Maya standing still. Chelsea aggressive. The moment of contact. Then stillness again. Someone recorded this? Malik asked, his voice low. Maya nodded. It's part of the cabin surveillance, standard on these flights. She tapped the screen again. Another clip appeared. This time, Malik saw himself standing in the lounge, offering his seat to the pregnant woman. They saw this too, Maya said. You see how different the energy is? He nodded slowly. I was going to let this all pass, she admitted. Let it be another silent lesson. But I've changed my mind. Malik looked up, startled. Why? Because too many people like Chelsea never get exposed, she said. They hide behind uniforms, behind policies, behind polite tones. But what they do cuts just as deep, and it never makes headlines. Until now. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. They're waiting for my final call. She said, legal. The media team? Malik's heartbeat thumped faster. He didn't know what she was about to do, but it felt big. Then she asked, you want to know what happens when truth meets power? He didn't answer. He couldn't. She slid the phone into her coat pocket. We're going public, she said, her voice steady now, almost cold. Malik stared at her. But won't that bring backlash? Of course, she replied. There always is. But this time, I'm not just defending myself, I'm showing. What happens when power stands up for those who usually get ignored? The car slowed as they neared a tall building, glass, steel, modern. She looked at him one more time. I didn't invite you here for thanks, she said. I invited you because I'm building something. A platform. For people who lead with heart. For people like you. Malik blinked. Me? You've got potential. But more than that, you've got instinct. And right now, I need voices around me that understand both the fight and the silence. The car stopped. The door opened. She stepped out first, then turned to him. You coming? He hesitated just a second, then followed. Inside the building, the lobby buzzed with quiet urgency, screens lit up with breaking news alerts. People moved fast, some on phones, some whispering to each other. Maya's assistant met them at the elevator, his face tense. They've picked up the cabin footage, he said. It's spreading fast. Maya gave a slight nod. Let them see it. Malik stood frozen, watching the chaos build around them. News vans had already started lining up outside. Cameras. Reporters. The world was about to know everything. And in that moment, Malik realized this wasn't just a story about a slap on a flight. This was about justice, about power used the right way, and about a young man who was suddenly standing on the edge of something far bigger than himself. But no one, not even Maya, could predict what would happen next. Asterisk. Maya stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, watching the rain fall over the city. Below, the chaos unfolded, reporters, flashing cameras. News headlines screaming Billionaire CEO assaulted by flight attendant reveals shocking footage. Her name was trending, not for her tech empire or her philanthropy, but because for once she hadn't stayed quiet. Behind her, Malik sat on a soft leather chair, still trying to make sense of it all. Everything had happened so fast. One moment, he was just another kid trying to chase opportunity. The next, he was sitting in a skyscraper next to a woman who had the power to shift global headlines. But through it all, Maya hadn't wavered. She had turned humiliation into a statement, not by screaming or retaliating, but by shining a light where others would have let darkness win. That night, Maya released a video, not a press release, not a statement carefully polished by lawyers, but her own voice, simple, clear. Human. She spoke not just of the slap, but of what it symbolized. Years of being overlooked, judged, silenced. She talked about dignity, about respect, about how power isn't about revenge but responsibility. And she didn't stop there. She announced a new initiative, a global leadership program focused on identifying and mentoring young people who lead with integrity, those who do the right thing. When no one is watching, Malik was the first name on that list. In the following weeks, offers came his way: scholarships, speaking engagements, internships. But more than that, something inside him changed. He walked straighter, spoke with more confidence, because someone like Maya had looked at him and seen not just potential but purpose. As for Chelsea, the airline issued an apology, and after a formal inquiry, she was dismissed from duty. She later released her own statement, admitting fault. and expressing a wish to unlearn the biases she hadn't realized had taken root inside her. Whether she meant it or not, only time would tell. But the story was no longer about her. It was about a quiet billionaire who proved that true strength isn't in how loud you speak, but in how gracefully you stand, and a young black teen who proved that sometimes the smallest act, like giving up a seat, can open the biggest doors. Moral of the story: power doesn't always wear a suit, kindness doesn't need permission, and respect should never be based on appearance. True character shows up when no one's watching, and when you lead with that, you'll find that life often rewards you in the most unexpected ways.